is by a guy from the Trimmer Lab, and take it away.
Okay, so hello everybody, my name is Guy. I'm a postdoc at Dr. Barry Trimmer's lab, and today I'm going to speak about motor control and also about motor control in soft bodies lacking articulations. So what is motor control?
Microphone.
Sorry. Better? Okay, so what is motor control? It's the activation of the body to move, which means activation of muscles or motors that force body parts to move relative to each other in order to generate movement. But first, the control system, in order to know which muscles to activate and how, the control system must do computations in which it has to conclude which muscles to activate in order to achieve the desired, the correct body deformation, thereby generating the movement. A naive observation of the world might lead us to the wrong impression that these computations are easy, because animals and humans activate their muscles so efficiently, and therefore very complex body movements might seem easy to generate. But the truth is that these computations are very complex, and then when they are done incorrectly or inefficiently, then the movement cannot be generated. Now the computations must be done in an inverse order. The controlling system must first take into account which is the attempted movement, and based on that, it has to conclude which is the correct, the desired body deformation that would lead to the generation of this movement. Then it has to conclude, based on the body deformation, which muscles to activate in order to achieve this body deformation. But the movement is not momentary, it's a sequence. It's a sequence of repositioning the end effectors. For example, here, the fingers are the end effectors, and we can see the different stages of repositioning them in order to generate the movement that will open the bottle cap. So the control system has to do multiple computations, and in each of these computations, it first has to take into account the correct repositioning of the end effectors. Based on that, it has to conclude which is the necessary body posture that will position the end effectors in the correct position. This part of the computation is called inverse kinematics. Then the control system has to take into account the body posture to conclude which muscles to activate in order to achieve this body posture. This part of the computation is called inverse dynamics. So the inverse kinematics is the process in which the control system has to compute which body posture will correctly reposition the end effectors. In other words, it has to compute what is the correct configuration of the body. The configuration of a single articulation is rather simple because it has a limited ability of deforming. For example, the configuration of the human elbow has only one parameter, which is the angle of the elbow. And then we say that the human elbow has 1 degree of freedom. The configuration of the human wrist, for example, has 3 parameters. And then we say that the human wrist has 3 degrees of freedom. All in all, the configuration of an articulated body is rather simple, because it has a rather small number of degrees of freedom. It can deform only in the articulations, and it has a rather limited number of articulations. On one hand, this is a limitation to the maneuverability. It limits our abilities to maneuver. For example, if my son had another articulation between his wrist and his elbow, he might have succeeded in touching this bottle cap from the inside like I asked him to do. But on the other hand, this small number of degrees of freedom makes the control simpler. Each additional degree of freedom would complicate the computations, Any deformable body point must be taken into account by the motor control system when it is computing how to configure the body. Additional degrees of freedom would mean additional computational burden. A complex body requires more computational power. A complex body without a suitable control system is a burden rather than an advantage, because more degrees of freedom require more control. What about soft animals, lacking articulations? These can deform at any point along their body. That means that they virtually have an unlimited number of degrees of freedom. So according to what I just said 2 seconds ago, their motor control systems would potentially require an unrealistic computational power. So how do these animals control their bodies so efficiently? So maybe these animals do have a greater computational power. We know that their nervous systems are not exceptionally large. The sizes of their nervous systems is about the same sizes of nervous systems of articulated animals. And in some cases, it's even the same nervous system. For example, this cute little fellow that we work with in Dr. Freeman's lab has a soft body, lacking articulations in the early stages of its life when it's a caterpillar. But when it turns into a moth, it has an articulated body. And it's the same nervous system that controls its body in both stages of its life. So how do soft animals control their bodies? The answer is that they are using entirely different motor control strategies. Okay? They don't directly compute the configuration of the body. They have very unique motor control strategies that we find. One example comes from the octopus, where the control system is distributed throughout the body. Part of the control of the octopus arm is embedded inside the nervous system of the arm itself. An isolated octopus arm shows complex behavior. It continues to live for more than an hour after amputation, and in this time it shows very complex behavior. And I'm not speaking about simple movements like we see in the lizard tail that wiggles for a few minutes after it's disconnected from the body. I'm speaking about really complex behavior. The arm can even detect food items and responds differently to them relative to what it responds to other items. So this is one example of a unique motor control strategy. Another term that comes into notion when speaking about motor control in soft animals is embodied intelligence. It's a term that was borrowed from roboticists. It means that that control strategies depend on the body structure. It means that some of the intelligence of the motor control is embedded inside the properties of the body. And it makes sense once thinking about it, because obviously the body and the motor control systems develop together through evolution. One example of this embodied intelligence comes from the crawling in the octopus. During crawling, the octopus uses its arms to push the body only by simple, stereotypical shortening, elongating movements of the arms that are controlled by predefined motor programs that are embedded inside the arms themselves. Since the arms are arranged in a circle around the body, to choose the crawling direction, the octopus only has to conclude which of the arms are to be recruited for the pushing. It doesn't even have to rotate its body. This reduces the number of controlled degrees of freedom to only 8, because the octopus has only to decide for each arm whether or not it will participate in the pushing. Another example comes from the tobacco hornworm. The tiny hooks at the tip of the proleg, called crochets, are used to grip the substrate. But amazingly, the gripping and the releasing don't require any active motor control. The crochets are arranged and shaped in a way that contact of the proleg with the substrate triggers them to hook into the surface, and the retraction of the proleg causes them to disengage from the surface. In my current project, we are tracking the crawling of the tobacco hornworm with a commercial device in order to capture its movements and reconstruct them in 3 dimensions so we can analyze them in real time. We are trying to better understand how the caterpillar senses the substrates the substrate it's crawling on, and how it uses this sensory information in order to control its body during crawling. That's it. Did I do it in time? Precisely. I trained.
So when people talk about athletes or musicians practicing, and they get what they call muscle memory, is that different, do you think, from what you're talking about in terms of this localized control of the nervous system?
I'm not sure what people mean when they say muscle memory. I know things like that exist, but not in humans, not in the sense that the memory is inside the muscle. In crustacean, it was found that some of the memory is inside the neuromuscular junction. This is also a surprise. I'm not sure what you mean. Maybe they develop more muscles, but it can be part of the motor control in general. If people say that athletes have memory in their muscles, it might mean that some of the motor control is about learning, is about changing. So maybe this is part of it. Okay, thank you.